Have you ever wanted to learn how to can meat? I want to make it as simple and as scrumptious as possible for you today, and I want to show you just how to can ground beef. So stick around in the next few minutes as I talk you through the process. I've just finished canning a whole bunch of meat, and it's already smelling amazing in here. I can't wait to share this with you. Stay with us. There are really about 14 reasons why you would want to can ground beef. It sounds counterintuitive unless you start thinking about it, and then you realize, yes, it saves electricity because you don't have to freeze it like most people store their ground beef. It doesn't have to take up the space in the freezer, so that is freed up for something else. It's pre-cooked, so you don't even have to heat it up if you don't want to once you've got it canned. It's pre-seasoned, so you're saving a whole lot of angst that way, unless you choose to do it without the seasoning. But then it's useful for casseroles and all kinds of different recipes where you're going to be needing ground meat that's sauteed and ready to go. You can just dump in a jar of your already canned meat. You'll find through the winter it makes it so much easier when you come home from work and you don't have to mess with a whole long process of preparing your evening meals. So I want us, and as well as making it shelf stable for quite a long time. There are many reasons why you want to consider doing this. It's going to be delicious, but let me talk you through just the main elements that you're going to need to make this a success. Of course, first of all, you're going to need a pressure canner. You cannot can meat in a water bath or steam canner or any other version. You don't have to get the fanciest one. This is an all-American 921 pressure canner that I'm using here today, but if you have a Presto or another brand that works well, as long as it's a pressure canner that you know how to use well, go ahead and use it. It's going to be great. You're going to want good jars, and of course a pint-sized jar is going to give about the perfect amount for 2 to 3 people. But if you have a larger family or a bigger group, you may be thankful for a little bit bigger jars. This is exactly the size of jar that's in between a pint and a quart. So you're going to see me use these often, and I just love them. They have a wide mouth, which makes it easy to get the meat in and out. And whenever you're canning any kinds of meats, a wide mouth jar is kind of the go-to as the easiest to use. And then you want good sealing lids. Now, I will say that the ball jars come with their own new lid. However, I don't believe those are made in the USA anymore, and I really do like supporting our local folks. So there's this wonderful company up in Ohio, Superb Canning, that they didn't pay me to sponsor this or anything like that, but they do make an even more superior lid than the ball canning jar lids, in my opinion. These are made in the USA. They have a scripture right inside the box, which I love so much when you open, and I've noticed that each box has a different scripture. It's really kind of cool. But let me pull these out and just show you how thick they are. They have a blue ring, which is handsome looking, but it's thicker. I mean, you can't poke your fingernail through that or anything. These are a substantial lid, and also the button, I don't know if you can hear that, but they have a substantial sucker down top lid that you really hear pop well when you can with these lids. It's very easy to tell if there's a compromised seal or if they're doing what they're supposed to. So I've been very pleased with these, and that's what we're using today. Always use new lids, whatever brand you use, always new lids, and you can reuse old rings, but I do have new ones here today. The other things that you're going to want, of course, are a jar lifter. I don't know who invented this or how long ago, but they need to be in the Guinness Book of World Records of smart people, because I love that they made this so easy so you don't burn yourself getting your jars in and out of a canner. All right, that's almost all you need as far as elements to make this work. You do need some good meat, and when you're canning meat, you want to kind of go lean, not completely fat-free, or it's not good tasting. You'd need about 1 part fat to 3 parts, I'm sorry, 1 part fat to 3 parts beef. So today we're doing about half grass-fed ground beef and ground bison. All right, so I've got this on pretty high heat right now. It's going to cook relatively fast, and today I'm just doing 4 pounds worth of ground beef. You could can it just like this with no salt, no spices of any kind, but I like to do a couple of things here. I like to put it on high heat so that I get just a little bit of browniness to it, but we're not going to cook it all the way through. And while it's cooking, I'm going to add just kind of a tablespoon of each of these. It's going to make it really easy. I'm going to add a tablespoon of Himalayan pink salt. And let me do that right now while you're with me. So a tablespoon of Himalayan pink salt sprinkled all over that. Then I'm going to take a tablespoon of ground pepper. You could get fancy if you wanted and use the ground from scratch type stuff, but the reality is often I notice when I'm doing it over heat like this, it ends up getting too much moisture up there into the grinder of it. So there's a tablespoon of ground pepper, and then I'm going to put 1 to 2 tablespoons of of minced onion and minced garlic. Both of them are dry, and they could be homemade dried if you wanted, or they could be, you could even caramelize some onions and do that to make it extra fancy, but really this is going to be good enough. I like a lot, so I'm going to put in 2. I told you 1 of each of these to keep it simple, but the reality is I usually like a lot. So 2 tablespoons of the onion and garlic is probably what I'm adding here. You can add as much or as little as you would like. That'll soak up the moisture obviously right now, but also when it's canning, it'll soak up the moisture beautifully and really season the meat nicely. Okay, so now that we've got all that in there, it's almost ready to go. I still see some pink, and I want just a little more of the pink out of there, but not 100% of it. All right, I think it's about ready, you guys. All we have to do now is get this in the jars, and it's ready to start processing. Okay, I'm turning that off. It smells wonderful. All right, I've got the beef all completely ready, and bison. And just so you know, you could do this with venison. If you've got elk or wild game, this is a perfect way to preserve it. We're just using this today. What I've got here, really, we're going to kind of let cool down to almost room temperature, because we're not using a hot pack method right now. We're actually using the same instructions that you would do if this was room temperature. But you want a good funnel because it's going to protect the rims of your jars. You want to, of course, have checked the rims to make sure that if you're using old jars, there's not even any chance of a hairline fracture or you know, anything that could mess up that perfect seal that's going to be needed for this to can correctly. But this is going to protect it from getting dirty as well, which is always nice. Also, I want to say, if by chance you find that your meat is has a little liquid at the bottom, go ahead and strain that off. You don't want to add that to this because it's probably got more fat in it than you're wanting to put in the canning jars. These are going to hold a little over 1 pound each, so it won't surprise me if I just get 3 full jars of this, but I'll see as soon as I get there. Also, we're filling these up to the top, but we're not squishing the meat down real tight. We're just filling it up, making sure there are no air pockets throughout, and we're only filling it up to that collar right there. That's the indication that that's 1 inch from the very top. You don't want to go higher than that, so keep that in mind. Otherwise, you could have it be overfilled and siphoning is what they call it when the water inside just starts coming out of the lid, and you don't want that. All right, I'm using organic beef broth. I always wonder exactly what's organic about it. You really want grass-fed beef broth whenever you're getting meat or milk or any product from cattle. You want grass-fed and organic. Okay, I'm just filling these right up to that 1-inch mark, not any further. You might hear that as it bubbles down into place. And we'll, even after we do this, the last little step is to kind of run a little, some sort of a rod down in there just to make sure there are no air bubbles that have somehow sealed themselves off and not gotten the broth in there with them. Here we go. Just making sure. No big. And I actually think this one is a hint overfilled, so I'm going to take out just a smidgen of that meat to make sure it fully fits under that 1-inch mark from the top. I do not want any siphoning or any of it coming out in the process of canning. The last step before these are ready to process is just saturating a little cloth with some white vinegar, and you're going to want to carefully go all the way around each of those rims just to make sure, again, no hairline fractures and no gunk. You don't want any kind of obstruction for that seal to have to fight with. And once you've got it there, you're ready to put those lids on. Just make sure they are clean. Interestingly, with pressure canning now, that they have changed the laws or rules that they had of pressure canning, saying that you do not have to heat these up ahead of time to sterilize them, because the process is going to take care of itself in the pressure canner with the high heat and high intensity pressure. All right, ready for the rings. When they say put on the rings finger tight, you want to just use 3 fingers, not your whole grip. Just use 3 fingers and tighten it down just gently until it stops moving. Not cranked on tight or anything. So it'll move freely, and then once it stops just about there. Thankfully, the process is pretty gracious, but you don't want them too tight or it could be bad for the whole process. You need, see, the air has to be able to escape, but not any more than just the air. So that's why these hold the lid, that flat part, in place long enough for the oxygen to escape actually through that seal, and then the rings are there still to hold it in place so that the heat actually pressurizes then down and seals up that good blue seal that you see around the edge there. If you haven't seen a pressure canner before, I want to just at least introduce you to it so you're familiar with it. It's going to come with all these stickers that they do want you to keep on it that have all kinds of warnings of heat and pressure and don't leave it unattended and all of that. Some people like to take those off, and I probably will someday. But it's going to have a gauge here that's really important. It's a geared gauge, and you need to make sure that it's in good working order. If there's any doubt that it might not be working, definitely go and have it checked, or call the manufacturer and see what they can help you with getting you a new gauge. And then over here on the side, you're going to see the steam vent. This, you're going to have a weight that sits on top of. If you look closely, you're going to see that it is listed with a 5, 10, and 15 pounds that is representative of. So the 5 is directly across from this little spot. You want the 5 down, and out of this hole is kind of where that 5 pounds of pressure is regulated. Or if I wanted to have 10 pounds of pressure, I put the 10 right there over top of it, and this is regulating that, or 15 pounds. If you're going to need to look up exactly where you live. You can even Google what is my elevation, because that makes a huge difference in which one of these numbers you're going to use and what you're going to be looking for on this gauge. The USDA website or your county extension office can tell you. Now, incidentally, here where I am standing in this exact spot, it's 907 feet elevation above sea level. So because of that, I fall under the 1,000-foot mark, which means that for this meat, I am supposed to process it with 10 pounds of pressure. So I'll be doing that here in just a few minutes. Now, Interestingly though, you don't put this on at first. You have to wait till a certain thing happens here before you know it's time to put that little weight on. And then I just want to bring you attention to this one little nubbin back here that's kind of hard to see. Let me see if I can turn this around. This is just a safety measure that is built into these so that it's a rubber stopper of sorts, but before this whole thing explodes, which is what everyone just dreads and thinks, oh no, that could happen to me. Imagine if it all exploded. They've built this rubber stopper in so that that would blow out first.